On today's call, we're going to discuss fever and the common question of whether we should try to squash a fever and put it out, so to speak, with something like Tylenol, which is a common recommendation from, say, pediatricians for your kids, or should we let the fever occur? And if so, why? Does it play a role in our immune function? And can we really melt a brain with fever? And so we'll start with looking at what the literature says about fever. And we'll start with this 2015 article here and walk forward into current day with the 2023 article as well. But I think you'll find it interesting. And it's whether you're new to the health field or the life, living a healthier lifestyle, or you've been in it for a while, I think it's always useful when you're wondering, is something useful, or should I do this? Should I squash something or allow it to occur? If we look at it from an evolutionary perspective or a historical perspective, that can help clear some of the confusion. And so for fever, what you hear a lot is, don't let your kid have 102, 103 fever. It could melt their brain and all this stuff. But if we go back and if there's science to look at, or if we just frame it from the perspective of, well, before we had Tylenol or before we had antibiotics, did people die, from mild fevers? And the answer is no. So then, okay, if they didn't die from fevers, was fever actually protecting them? And the answer would be, well, let's dive into research on the topic and see. And so looking at this information can help us make better decisions for our children when they're sick, or for ourselves when we're sick. So looking at this paper from Nature Reviews Immunology here from 2015, the title is Fever and the Thermal Regulation of Immunity. The immune system feels the heat. And diving into the abstract here, it says, fever is a cardinal response to infection that has been conserved in warm and cold-blooded vertebrates for over 600 million years of evolution. So, that's a clue right there. Is if the physiologic response goes back 600 million years, all the way back, like pre-warm-blooded, all the way into cold-blooded vertebrates, that's something that nature has deemed very important and has stuck around for a very long time. So it's probably something we want to pay attention to and actually utilize, because it's helped us make it to this point. So over 600 million years, fever has been a response to infection, conserved across all species. So this isn't like fever isn't unique to humans. It's conserved across all species, warm-blooded and cold-blooded. So it must have use for us. The fever response is executed by integrated physiological and neuronal circuitry and confers a survival benefit during infection. So fever confers a survival benefit. Sounds like a good thing. So we probably don't want to, put that fire out, so to speak. Here we review our current understanding of how the inflammatory cues delivered by the thermal element of fever stimulate both sides of the immune system, the innate and the adaptive immune responses. The adrenergic signaling pathways associated with thermogenesis shape immune cell function. So down there it says adrenergic, that's having to do with epinephrine, norepinephrine. Those signaling pathways are associated with creation of heat to shape the immune cell function or the immune response. So this paper, we won't go into all 37 pages of this paper. It's great and has great graphics and explains a lot. So I'd encourage you to look this up on Google. You can download it yourself and read it. But what I really want you to get from this is that fever has been around for much longer than humans have, and it confers survival benefit for infection. So it's something we may not want to squash. Now, if we jump forward to this paper here, it says, let fever do its job, the meaning of fever in the pandemic era. So this was published in 2021 in the journal Evolution, Medicine, and Public Health. And if we look at what these authors said, they say, fever as an evolved fever is an evolved defense. Fever, the regulated increase in body temperature, is part of the evolved systemic reaction to infection known as the acute phase response. The heat of fever augments the performance of immune cells, induces stress on pathogens and infected cells directly, and combines with other stressors to provide a non-specific immune response. So 3 big keys that fever does for us. It increases the performance of our immune cells, so helps them kill. It causes stress on the infecting agents, the pathogens and the infected cells, so it helps kill them. And it combines with other stressors to provide non-specific immune defense. Observational trials in humans suggest the survival benefit from fever, and randomized trials published before COVID do not support fever reduction in patients with infection. Randomized trials published before COVID do not support fever reduction in patients with infection. So, that would fly in the face of what every pediatrician in the world tells a parent when they call and say, my kid has a fever, what should I do? Oh, give them Tylenol, break the fever. No, not necessarily. The research says that fever is helping kill the infections, helping that kid. So we want to keep it around. For infections with novel SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19, the precautionary principle applies. Unless evidence suggests otherwise, we advise that fever should be allowed to run its course. So even in COVID, these people said, let the fever run its course. Well, why? We'll see that in a couple minutes in a different paper, but sufficient for now is that regardless of the infection, these authors are supporting allowing the fever to occur. So that was kind of in nerd terms. In lay people terms, they say lowering body temperature has not improved survival in laboratory animals or in patients with infections. Blocking fever can be harmful because fever, along with other sickness symptoms, evolved as a defense against infection. Fever works by causing more damage to pathogens and infected cells than it does to healthy cells in the body. During COVID-19, the benefits of allowing fever to occur probably outweigh its harms for individuals and for the public at large. So that is probably a shocking paper for most people who have, grown up as lay people and just heard, oh, fever is bad, fever is bad. If we jump to the 2023 paper here, this one says fever integrates antimicrobial defenses, inflammation control, and tissue repair. Multiple lines of evidence support the value of a moderate fever to host survival. Animals exerting fever engaged inflammatory cytokine gene programs in the central nervous system, increased efficiency of white blood cell recruitment into the immune challenged site or the infected site, and markedly improved pathogen clearance, even when an infecting bacterium grew better at higher temperatures. Now that's interesting. So fever, even against bugs that do better in a hotter environment, you think the fever would favor the bacterium, but even against those heat-loving bacteria, the fever showed improved killing of those bacteria. We identified selectivity in the protective immune mechanisms activated through fever. Fever then inhibited inflammation and markedly improved wound repair. So, we might not want to put fever out either if we want to heal wounds optimally. Together, our results define fever as an integrative host response that regulates induction and resolution of acute inflammation, and demonstrate that this integrative strategy emerged prior to endothermy during evolution. So basically, fever was around before warm-blooded life was. So the fever response can be seen all the way back into cold-blooded vertebrates, which we saw earlier in this 2015 paper. Then lastly, we can look at this paper in Frontiers in Medicine that said moderate fever cycles as a potential mechanism to protect the respiratory system in COVID-19 patients. You might remember back to 2020, the severe cases were developing acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS, which drove mortality or death in those COVID patients. Well, this paper is looking at, does inhibiting fever or allowing it to happen allow those patients, impact whether those patients do better or worse. So here we go. A natural rise of body temperature during mild fever can naturally accumulate higher cellular levels of heat shock protein 70 that can arrest cell death and protect lung cells from inflammatory damages. However, beyond 1 to 2 hours of fever, no heat shock protein 70 is being further produced. We suggest that antipyretics or anti-inflammatories, anti-fevers, may be beneficial in COVID-19 patients subsequent or after several hours of mild advantageous fever, allowing lung cells to accumulate protective heat shock protein 70 against damages from the inflammatory response to the COVID virus. With age, the ability to develop fever and accumulate heat shock protein 70 decreases. So, interestingly, this paper kind of goes into more nuance, and they say, hey, at least let the fever go for 1 to 2 hours, because in addition to all the other factors that we saw in the other papers, beneficial benefits of fever, this paper shows us that fever allows increase of heat shock protein 70, which protects the lungs. So they said, hey, allow them to have the fever 1 to 2 hours, maximize the heat shock protein 70 accumulation, and then after that, you might want to use some fever reducing strategies. And then the last nugget there is, with age, the ability to develop fever and accumulate the heat shock protein 70 decreases. And that fits along with what we've seen in various videos, where physiologically we have decline in antiviral immune defenses. And so these would fit, the decline in ability to make fever and heat shock proteins would fit that physiologic decline. So again, we can't do anything about the physiologic decline, but we do want to prevent piling on to that physiologic decline via living an unhealthy lifestyle and accelerating that decline due to poor health choices. And so the summary statement, I guess, from these studies would be that fever is a protective mechanism that promotes survival in infection. Fever is older than humanity, so we should listen to the wisdom in how old it is and how useful it has been across many species, both cold-blooded and warm-blooded. And if we want to get more nuanced, then this paper at least says allow the fever to occur for 1 to 2 hours before trying to quote unquote break it.